start by yeah, it's live.
Okay, so it says live. Should be on YouTube, I think, right? Should be streaming right to my channel. So, alrighty. Well,
You can start. We can start with opening arguments. Then kind of like ask questions. And what does that say?
Oh, it's just Woodward.
Oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, so I used to like it, but I don't really recommend it anymore. You know, I think that's the big thing with schools. The schools are closed. I think this is a good opportunity for like smaller community colleges, state schools, and I think this actually should close a lot of the borderline. That is, I think it's most likely to close, especially schools on the margin. Like I think if you paying $60,000 a year to sit at home and take classes on Zoom, you're insane. You're completely insane. I don't care what the school is. You should take the year off. You know, like get a job. Don't waste your time on Zoom. Yeah. Just wasting. Go take classes at a community college or, you know, a university, a state school or something. Save yourself a ton of money. Buy a car with the money you save, and you could buy a fancy car.
That could be an idea. Do you think you want to do? So we do openings, we do questions, and then we do closing.
Okay. I mean, we didn't really have a set topic or anything, so.
Right. Okay. So we can go by. You can just start by saying, for instance, you know, the position that you take based on taxes, whether you support regressive, progressive, or flat taxes, or the idea of optimal taxation. What you like about it, what you don't like about it. Or how it would be, your proposed.
Actually, I can say I think we should get rid of the income tax altogether and go more of a. It would basically be a sales tax, or I don't really like the sales tax, but maybe tariffs, right? So I think we should go back to the way it was in the very beginning with tariffs. Hi, Nathan. So. Yeah, so I think we should get rid of the income tax. And the reason we should, number one, to get rid of the income tax is the fact that the IRS is a weapon against enemies, right? So, yeah, I mean, we saw that in the Trump administration. The IRS was actually used against, they tried to use it against him, but mainly under the Obama administration, and just taking a page from infamously Nixon, where they used Lois Lerner and the IRS to attack political opposition. Right, so I think that's really the key role the IRS plays in terms of government. They don't even make that much money. I think of the about $3 trillion the U.S. government brings in, the IRS brings in about half or less, and it costs them a fortune to collect it. So IRS doesn't really have any use on that end necessarily, and I think it would be a lot easier to do more of a tariffs approach, and it would be a fairer approach rather than making people, especially with the IRS. There's kind of a joke meme. It's like, hey, I'm from the IRS, write down how much money you made and how much money you owe me. And then the person is like, I can write down whatever I want. I said, no, I already know how much you owe me and how much you said. And so you're telling me if I need to write down the right number, yeah, if you write down the wrong number, I'm going to send you to jail, right? It's like entrapment or something. So I think the IRS should go away, and they should. And I also obviously I have other views on what should happen with the government. The government should go tariffs to fund itself, and that's more of a fairer, flatter version of what could be done. Tariffs, that's what they should be instead of come on, Nathan. So I don't know. What do you think of that?
Okay. Well, first of all, I would like to say that I am not very, I don't hold a degree in economics like you do and everything like that. So my knowledge of taxation and all of that is very basic. And so I would say that my argument would be that um, I will just take this stance. Hey, how are you?
Hey,
Hey.
nothing.
Things are good. Well, I would say I think.
Are you him? No, I'm just kidding. Now, and by the way, I mean, I'm not. This is not a view that is generally taught in economics class, anyways. So it's a somewhat of a probably not a mainstream view, anyways. Because in economics class, they talk about maximizing revenue through taxation proposals and other things. So go ahead. Sorry.
Sure. So well, I think that these are some views that I have been kind of reading and trying to understand, make sense. And so basically, I have that there are at least three categories in which taxes are defined. Basically, you have a regressive tax, which is used to sales. An example of a regressive tax would be sales or something that it is taxed in increments. It's little by little. When you go buy something, they tax you, and that is going to be accumulated, but it is not a lump sum. Then you have a progressive tax that accounts for the abilities and skills of the person that is producing that money, and therefore they tax it according to that. And then the other category, you have a flat taxation, which would be, a certain percentage to everybody, regardless of their ability and regardless of their whatever they make, right? Just the same percentage.
Yeah. So I that's why I think I mentioned sales tax, but that's not something I necessarily like because, well, number one, there are ways that they could give you a refund on the sales tax, like if your income is less than a certain amount. But in that case, of course, then you're kind of bringing in the IRS again. So I think the sales tax is difficult because of how regressive it is, right? And again, the idea that it's regressive is that the fact that it's regressive is the idea that the poor spend a larger proportion of their money on purchase items like toilet paper, stuff that's taxed, right? And so now food, I think it's nationwide. I'm assuming it's everywhere. Food and is exempt, right? So you spend like 10% of your income on food and 40% on housing, utilities, stuff like that. So you get like half your income on taxes and other things. And the more the amount of food you eat is, the more money you make, the more expensive food you buy. But in general, your income, the amount of food you purchase is not going to change significantly. So higher incomes spend lower proportions of their money on sales stuff.
Right. And so basically, I think, but we do agree that there has some negative effects to sales taxes and all of that. And but at the same time, for example, a regressive tax has a positive effect in which you can regulate certain items, for instance, tobacco. You can increase the taxes on there, and then therefore regulate some sort of like the behavior on the people.
Yeah.
That pay more. Right.
Yeah.
So
yes, I think and again, that's another downside of sales tax is the power to tax is the power to destroy. And so if you tax certain items, you can really destroy those items by giving their competition. And that is like substitutes and things like that. You can give them an advantage by taxing certain items and not others. So that's why I think sales tax.
And there is the possibility that there is the assumption that, you think that this product would be in the best interest of society to be taxed more or less, and then it ends up not being the case. Like, I don't know, for instance, something that there is less, there is a scarcity of certain resource or something, therefore you tax it more, or something along those lines. I would just come up with something. I think.
Yes, one of the questions in the little chat was optimal tax, and optimal tax depends on your subjective view of what tax should be. And so typically in economics macro classes, optimal means maximizing government revenue, which I think is that's not something I would agree with. I don't think that maximizing government revenue is necessarily a positive thing. Even the Laffer curve, the idea is how do we maximize government revenue by increasing or decreasing the tax rate, right? You decrease the tax rate, you expand the tax base, you raise total revenues. Nobody knows what the Laffer curve really looks like, but theoretically it's an upside down parabola sort of. And we could say 0% taxes raises no money, 100% taxes raises no money, and then in between you have various levels.
And so I think the what is it, the optimal taxation that you just mentioned, basically, my understanding is that there is a combination of these taxations in order to maximize revenue, because the assumption is that if you maximize revenue, the economy would be a good economy, and that would be in the interest of society, correct?
Theoretically, that's
right.
part of the nature of.
Okay, so you are
society, but
so
I don't think making people poor is not in the best interest of society,
right.
And so I don't think taxation. No, I mean, modern monetary theory is getting more and more popular, and I've been predicting for a few months that that's going to be like official policy coming up pretty soon, and that's where taxes don't really play a role in revenue for the government. Government just prints money and then buys stuff with it, and then they use taxes to extract extra money from the system. But that's the basic, very simple view of what it is. But obviously, it's more complicated, but not much. It's actually not much more complicated than that.
So and then there is also the idea is that you do with taxation, you do have some benefit. In security, in army and armed forces, you do have some funds for the necessities that people may have, such as some people think healthcare is a necessity, some people think education, and those things that are essential for society to function. So you do have some benefit, but then at the same time, and there is also the idea that similar people should be taxed similarly, right? Whatever that would mean. So I think my argument would be that, or at least the view that I support would be that, a tax that is balanced and it takes into account the moment that the just basically common sense idea that if the tax is balanced, the taxation is balanced, and the taxation takes into account the times that that nation is going through, then you can elaborate a system, but that does not mean that that system is going to be definite. And if, say, for instance, if there is an external factor such as a war, that doesn't mean that the same type of progressive tax or a regressive tax is going to cause the same effect. Therefore, I think that on a basic level, you would have some sort of balance and time approach effort to develop a system to do that. That would be something that I would support. Now, you were saying that you would support something to us to get rid of the IRS, because there's a way in which it could be weaponized towards certain. It could be weaponized towards people, right? And also, it takes a lot of effort and money and work to collect that money in some of the cases. Therefore, even if the IRS generates less than half of the revenue that it should produce, then it wouldn't make that much sense, right? I think that was what you were mentioning.
Yeah, and again, I'm not totally against taxes, right? So
right.
turn my keyboard back on. But so I would also point out that during war and things like that, the government doesn't actually tax really. It tends to borrow and print, right? And so you can see government expenditure.
Before or after is when really taxation is when there is like before war or after war is when taxation would be into play or something along those lines.
Well, like World War II, they had a lot of borrowing, and it was. I guess you could call it taxation because they had groups, and propaganda also played a part in this, but they would have groups that would go out and basically force you to buy war bonds. Like you got an extra $50, they would say, hey, buy a war bond, and then they would harass you. And if you didn't buy a war bond, they might push you into an alley and beat you up, right? And those are things that actually happened. So during war, they don't tax. The amount of money people have generally goes down as they get drafted or whatever. So there's not really, the base gets smaller, especially if you try to raise taxes on them. So what they do is they tend to borrow and print. And then after the war is over, everybody comes home, kind of try to start the economy going back up again. And then as that happens, the government's taxes go back up because there's more people working. The base has increased. Not necessarily the tax rate. Now, a lot of people, AOC, etc., want to go back. Hey, 1950s, we had this big boom, and the tax rates were 95%, right? In some states, in cities like New York City, and yeah, we had boom, but it's because nobody paid them, right? I mean, this is pre-computer days, so the government wanted to know how much money you made. They had to get an accurate report from your employer and from you, and this stuff was typically mailed in or something, right? So there really was no way for the government to know exactly how much you made. Today, it's very difficult to evade taxes. It's very difficult to evade taxes. You can avoid them by just not paying taxes you don't have to pay, but it's simple to evade. So tax rates today, if they were to go up that high, that would be disastrous, right? The Bernie Sanders tax plan, which is going to be the Biden tax plan, is disastrous. You would see a drop in revenues.
So basically, his tag. I think what was that? What was his approach? He was proposing again.
Well, Bernie was talking like a 70 something. AOC was getting in the tippy top. Right? She's using the tippy top $10 million.
Right, and I think Joe Biden was talking about that every person that makes $400,000 a year is going to be the taxes are going to be raised for that people, right?
Yeah, but we've heard that before. Oh yeah, I won't raise taxes on anybody, right? Obama said that as well, and of course the ACA was a tax, so it was a tax on people that couldn't afford the extremely expensive health insurance. So, taxes. But.
So and what about? I just wanted to explore a little bit on the tariffs and the way how the tariffs would be more fair and that your thoughts about it.
Well, a tariff is just you get rid of the IRS, and so you don't have this big government entity getting deeply involved in your life, right? Knowing exactly how much, and then if you want to run for, I mean, if you look at the investigation into the Russia non-collusion, right, which was as much as possible proven that it was a hoax, and however, they indicted like 27 people or something, having nothing to do with the campaign, having nothing to do with anything involving Trump, having nothing to do with relations with Trump within mostly 10 years, right? They were going back like 10 years and looking at people's taxes and saying, it was a little, you didn't dot the I here, you didn't cross the T, so we're going to send you to prison. And then we're going to tell the press all about it. And it was just to make a big announcement, to make people think that this investigation was real, and it was just an IRS ploy. And of course, you go back to Nixon famously did it. Going back to Obama, he did it with Lois Lerner, and that's when you get the tax exempt status for certain organizations. They looked at organizations that use the word freedom and liberty, which should tell you, they were against freedom and liberty, right? It's because they were intentionally slow walking or just ignoring or refusing to even bother with any conservative organization's tax exempt status. And because the IRS is a big tax system, you donate to a tax exempt organization, you give them $100, you get a $25 to $50 write off. Whatever your tax rate is, you don't have to pay that. So if you donate $100 and you're at 38%, you're really only donating $62 effectively. And so there's a big benefit to donate to a tax exempt organization when given the opportunity. And so that's a way to attack and prevent funding. So you're taxing these organizations and the people that donate to them and preventing them from getting funded. And that was the purpose of that. And that's what, they really use the IRS as a sword in that way. And of course, I also mentioned before that Jefferson said the power to tax is the power to destroy. And if you look at two businesses that are competing, you had originally Amazon was tax-free because it was on the internet, and bookstore had 10% tax. And so Amazon benefited at a 10% advantage. And then once Amazon got big enough, they supported the internet sales tax. And because they have the complicated software to deal with. And so they were pushing for an internet tax so that they could prevent other people from trying to compete with Amazon, right? That's what taxation does, is it prevents its use.
What about the approach of tariffs that you were mentioning? What would be the effect, and what would be the advantages over the taxation?
Tariffs were not used as a taxation method. They were used as a way to try to basically even the score, right? Even the playing field. Because if you try to sell to China or a lot of other countries, you're going to get a big tax, right? One of the reasons that you don't see American cars in China, you see some, but they're built in China, is the tax on import cars is about 140%. That means if you're going to import a car from the United States, you're going to pay double, right, or more. And and by the way, same thing in Norway. And if you're going to buy an ICE engine, then you're going to pay 100-200% tax. But that means that the competition, the price of their cars are going to be less than half. Right. So even if you really want that imported car, the fact that you can get a local one for half price, even if it's not as good or not as safe or not as high a quality, it's half the money, right? So that's half the money is an enormous, like a lot of things where if we paid half, we wouldn't be concerned that much with quality necessarily, right? Because maybe you can't afford that car that's twice as much. So it's a big advantage that taxation that other countries have for their local goods. And I think that was the purpose of the tariffs. Now I think the tariffs should be maybe more across the board, get rid of the IRS and the income tax, and instead impose some kind of like tariffs. And what you would have is a fairer tax. I think it would be a fairer tax.
But wouldn't that be something like a regressive tax, or a tariff wouldn't be just as equivalent or similar to a regressive tax?
Well, it really depends on how much imports you actually buy. Like, because if you're buying a lot of food and a lot of just basic supplies, most of that is made in the U.S. It wouldn't even be a tariff, right? So your tariffs would only be on luxury goods for the most part, or some like knickknacks and stuff that you get from overseas, China and other areas. But in some ways it might be a little bit, but the sales tax is a tax on everything you buy, right? It would be like they want like 15-20% sales tax, and there's no way to avoid it. So people avoid income tax right now, that's one good thing, is you can avoid the income tax in some ways by just negotiating cash with somebody. I think everybody does for right now, although the coronavirus is one. They're going to use that to eliminate cash, right? Because they want to eliminate cash. They've already done it in China. They've done it in India, right? They're getting rid of the major bills and a lot of other countries, so they can track every purchase you make and all that, and make sure they tax it and etc. But sales tax is another way to do that. You would be. I think you need cash for that kind of thing. You need cash for those things to exist.
Right. And so basically, a tariff. How would the tariff would work in the model or the idea that you have?
I haven't come up with a specific model, but you could just tax everything that comes in at 10%. Right? I mean, that would be a pretty simple model.
Gotcha.
It's straight across the board type tax. You want to do that.
10% from the value of the whole item itself. But so what would happen? Basically, people that have to purchase more often would be taxed more than people that would be, for instance, I don't know, that would just find a way to be purchasing less. Like, for instance, would services be taxed as well? Or only goods?
Right now they are, right? For the most part.
Right. But with the tariff, I mean.
You could import, well, you could tax imported services. I mean, you could do that. If you're contracting a service with an overseas organization, you could tax that.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you're just talking about imports. So
for instance, say that there is a service, I don't know, some sort of if you apply that to everything, would you apply tariffs to everything? But if you would do that, for instance, you have an inventor, right?
Yeah.
And the inventor works several hours doing this, new type of widget that works with engines and whatever, right? And so the person that hired him would have to pay tax once, for instance, right? But then someone that goes to, say, for instance, or someone that goes to an economist every year has to pay once, right? Or someone that is hired only once, then it will just be taxed once. But what about the person that, or a surgeon or someone that is doing something along those lines that would be just longer, that would be just taxed once. But what about the person that is I don't know, say for instance, I don't know. I was just thinking about the idea of an attorney that has different clients. So that attorney would be taxed every single time that a client comes in.
Well, yeah, but if you're, I mean, it's size, right? So it would be a single rate. So if you're going to have one client for the whole year,
right,
and taxed one time, it would be 10% of whatever that is versus a bunch of smaller clients, 10% of a bunch of smaller clients. It's kind of a wash for the most part, right? I mean, it depends on how much money it is, but it's a percent. It's not a fixed amount.
But in theory, you could have 10 clients in a month, right?
Yeah.
And those 10 clients are going to generate you, say, for instance, $100,000. And then you take, say, for instance, a 10% or a 5% on each of those transactions. And so you add those transactions, let's say at 5% each, you are being taxed 50. Is that correct? 50%, right? Well, you have only one client, and you are taxed 10%.
They would be like if you have 10 clients totaling 10,000, right?
Yeah.
So that would be 500. 5% would be $500
per client.
Yeah.
And then that multiplied by, and then multiply that by how many clients was it? 5? 10. So multiply that.
But it would just be 5% of each smaller amount, which would sum up to 5% of the larger amount, which would be 5,000. Versus if you had one client and you charge $100,000, 5% is 5,000. So because it is a proportion, not a fixed amount. Now, if you were to say it's going to be $1,000 per person, then yeah, that's what you're talking about. That would be more, right? But here it's just a proportion. So no matter what, so you have one big versus a bunch of small, and the small add up to the size of the large. Because it's proportion, it would be the same tax, right? So that would be, you could say that the cost of getting the tariff out of each of those 10 clients, or adding taxes to 10 people, might be a small amount more, just because there's usually some kind of cost associated with taxing. And that's why large companies like taxes is they have the HR to work with every individual fill out their IRS form and submit it, and they have the tax accountants to reduce their taxes. Versus if you're a small, tiny firm, it's very difficult to compete with those because the amount of revenue you bring in doesn't justify an in-house tax person. Whereas obviously Amazon has, probably 1,000 high-priced lawyers and stuff.
But even if the tax would be, the tariff would be proportional for the big client and for the little ones, like the many small ones, then you are probably incentivized to just get bigger clients, right? To be taxed on one.
It wouldn't matter. I mean, obviously, you would have an incentive. It would be nice if you could have one large client because it is simpler to service one large client. But that would be the same with you're looking at profit, right? That wouldn't be from a tax perspective. That would be from a profit perspective. Is that it's just easier to deal with one client than try to put a bunch of small clients together to equal one client in terms of revenue. I mean, like if you have a bunch of small jobs, right? Let's say you worked for like 4 or 5 different companies at once, and then I finally got one company, say, and I was there, had a regular full-time position with them for a few years, right? And it's like, oh, so much easier, right? Taxes are easier, getting IRS, right? Taxes are easier to deal with. I don't have to collect W-2s from 5 different people, employers, and then I have a complicated tax return, right? I don't have to check email for 5 different.
But the focus there would be that you're trying to get money, right? If you're working for 5 people, you're trying to get money. But if we turn around the focus to the good to quote unquote society that you're bringing to the welfare to it, then if you are, say for instance, an economist, right, and you're giving services to small businesses, you have different like small clients. Sort of times. Let me just
phone call.
No, it's just okay. So basically, what I was trying to say is, if you have you're an economist, right? You have several clients that have small projects or whatever. You're probably not going to be so incentivized to work for all of them, which you would, probably would bring more benefit to economy because you are helping several small businesses to work things out. But if you're only bringing a to one client, then that's going to be more like a closer or similar to some sort of monopolized idea or less services to more individuals. If you see it from the perspective of services, if you see it from the perspective of goods, same thing. If a person can buy, I don't know, just some device that serves them for multi-purposes, it's going to be better off than just buying a bunch of things.
Yeah. Now again, by the way, we're kind of talking about a flat tax here because we kind of got off the idea of tariffs, but it seems like, because I mean, we were talking about importing clients for a moment, but now we're basically talking about flat tax, right?
Well, I guess flat tax would be, charging the same percentage to everybody.
Yeah, which is what we're talking about here, is the same percent. A proportional tax, a flat proportional tax, which I think.
So it would be a mix of a tariff and a flat one, right? Because you are charging every.
Could be more of a flat tax just on imported goods, right? And by the way, what that could do is also it could clean up the other tariff issues, right? So any kind of tariffs you have certain tariffs on certain products from certain countries, right? There's the T-shirt, the Snuggie. Is it a T-shirt? Is it a blanket? It depends, because the tariff would be different for the two, right? So there's a lot of ambiguity in there. Is your shirt more or less than like 10% cotton or something like that, right? So it's synthetic, which, there's different taxes on synthetic than there is on cotton, and on and on. It's the massive book of free trade, right? It's this 5,000 page NAFTA book or something that tells you how to trade freely, right? Which shows it's not really free trade anyways. It's a bunch of complicated tariffs. You can simplify that book, toss it in the fire, say, hey, we're just going to do a flat tariff on everything. Right? Now, I would say some countries would benefit from that. Other countries would be hurt by it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you could have poor countries that are able to manufacture cheaply, although because it is proportional, they wouldn't be hurt that bad. But just relative to the way it is now, if a country had no tariff, another country had a 5% tariff, and we imposed a national 10% tariff on everything, then the country that presently has no tariff would be hurt relative to the country that had a 5% tariff, right? However, Americans would have more money in their pocketbooks, and they would be able to choose rather than the IRS taking it and telling exactly where it should be spent, right? The average American would have, what's the average? The average effective tax is 25%, maybe 20%.
Right?
Yeah, so like $100,000 income would now have extra 20 grand in their pocket. And that 20 grand, they could use that to go buy goods, which would be more expensive, but they could look at the prices now rather than having the money taken out of their pocket before they even see it and then going out and buying goods. They would have the option, and I think this is a good thing for freedom of choice and enterprise, is that now that you have an extra 20 grand, you can take that and you can go out and spend it in whatever way you wish. And you can look at the prices because the import tax would be in the sticker price. And now you can look at sticker prices and see whether or not it's worth it, right? You can compare goods and prices of different goods. And you can compare imports to domestically made products that would have a different price, but at least you would have that choice.
Right. Well, I think, regressive tax, like you were saying, it hurts more the low-income people based on the amount of transactions that they would have to do compared to, more wealthy people. But then you have to see what is the questions that I would pose would be, what is the focus of taxation? What is the purpose to do that? So basically, it is the benefits of government. It is the flow of income so that people can generate. And how do you balance people's production with the benefits that government produces too?
What was that?
How do you balance? How do you balance to incentivize people to produce, to work, to try to produce more for the economy, in versus the benefits that the government brings to.
I mean, getting rid of the IRS would be a big incentive, right? Because people would have more money in their pockets, and then they would be able to choose what they want to do with it. But I mean, you could, if you were someone that just liked having more money and you didn't want to spend it, right? You could live pretty frugally, and you could build up a larger savings. So I think that would benefit society because that's more money that's loanable, right? That can be loaned into the economy, which is how it's more capital available to businesses that could then grow.
Would that have the same effect on the government? For instance, the government is getting from every paycheck, from every contribution, is getting some sort of like a lump sum, right? But would that have the same effect in the government, just to have little taxations every time that something's bought or sold or something along those lines, as opposed to you work for a month or for 2 weeks, and then some of that money is going to go straight to, from all those employees, it's going to go straight to in the lump sum. So what would be the effect or the difference between those two?
From the government perspective?
Right.
I don't think it would have a big effect because
for instance, if people are not incentivized to buy something as much.
Huh?
If people are just not buying a lot.
Yeah, well, I mean, so the government maybe they have a little less money. Right now, that's we're just specifically talking about IRS because other taxes are still there. So road taxes, gas taxes, most other taxes, this would probably be added on to sales tax, possibly. You could do that, but I mean, that would be a different sales tax would probably still be there though, right? It would just be, this would be like it would be, again, a tax on the good as it enters the country, and then boom, the tax is there, the price of the good goes up, it goes to the store. That would increase the sales tax a little bit, right? So you'd have higher sales tax. Because again, if sales tax is 10% of a $100 item, it's $10. Now the item is taxed when it comes in, say it's $110, and now that $10 in tax is $11 in sales tax. So you could see higher sales tax to your local economy, right? Less to the federal government, which is good. More local pressure or more local funding. You can still have gas tax, all those taxes, and yeah, maybe with higher.
What about in the Army? How do you tax that?
How do you tax what?
Having an army. How do you fund the army?
That would be how you tax the army or fund the army, would be from the tariffs. The tariffs would fund the federal government, right? So the federal government could then allocate the tariff money to whatever it deems necessary, military, etc. And I mean, we could get really complicated. They could pass a lot of the other things the federal government does down to the states. The states would have more money with higher sales tax. Right,
but
because
wasn't that exactly what the king was doing, just putting tariffs on the colonies and everything, and that was the reason why everything just, because it could be excessive sometimes, if, according to the like in this case it would be the government that would be so.
Talking about the revolution, was that?
Right.
Well, they had no income tax, so.
Right.
I mean, they had all kinds of taxes, right? But they didn't have the kind of taxes we have today. So we could go back to something similar to that. They had the Stamp Act, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is like a carbon tax. Think about that. So the Stamp Act is like a carbon tax. Stamp Act was every piece of paper you needed, and you needed paper for every transaction. You were going to get taxed on every transaction. That would be like a carbon tax today, right? The carbon tax is a tax on everything you do. You're breathing, you're taxed, right? So leaving your house, you're taxed. Going to sleep, you're taxed. Eating, you're taxed. So,
right. So
I think we should definitely not go that direction.
Right. I think so too. I think
the founders, when they cast off Britain, they went to a tariff. They said, how are we gonna fund everything? And it was tariffs.
Gotcha.
If you're a fan of Alexander Hamilton, he wrote a lot saying that tariffs should be much higher.
I would propose, because for instance, AOC and some of the other ideas that talk about on wealth redistribution and all of those type of things seem to have let's assume that they do have good intention, but I just don't think that are what is the word, effective or real or something along those lines. I would just say that it would be probably better that the government would use some sort of like a progressive task in which you do have the IRS, at least for the time that the economy has shown that is just decline. For instance, you have a pandemic, you have a war, you have something that has the most vulnerable people, to sort of in a worse position, and then you have the people that produce, the massive producers and everything. You have that in a better position for some reason. Then it wouldn't make that much of nonsense to say, well, either to incentivize tax breaks to charity or to donation, or either do some sort of behavioral taxation on some sort of the.
Well, you'd have a lot more money in people's pockets, so they'd have a lot more money to donate.
Right, right. That's what I'm kind of talking about. But at the same time, would it make sense that, say, for instance, you have Elon Musk, right? For example, I just came up with that. You have Elon Musk that is working on inventions, which is amazing, which is pretty good.
Mm.
But then you have I don't know, a store that everybody needs. Right? So which one would make more sense to be taxed more? But what would it be an effect, to deter people
Well,
to
right now, Elon Musk actually he's probably the most heavily subsidized person in the United States with tax money, right? Because his competition is taxed and the money is given to him through the carbon credit scam.
Mhm.
So,
So he would be the one that is more benefit, and is that incentivizing people to work for him and do and create more inventions? Is that being better for everybody?
well, if you just, again, if you, he does make his cars in America, right? So he would be benefiting, but he wouldn't be benefiting in the same way as he is right now, where the IRS takes money from you, and of course, CAFE standards, other government regulations that basically tax real car companies and give it to him 500 million a year in carbon credit for his infinite miles per gallon vehicle, and raises the CAFE average, which is terrible. I think it's a ridiculous policy. But by the way, the IRS looks like about 3.5 billion. I'm not sure about that.
But still, there are just organizations like him that have benefits and those incentives, because the idea underneath is that there's people that are going to be incentivized to go pro that idea, right? Whether it's inventions, whether it's some sort of commodity or something that is necessary. The idea of the Democrats is basically stating that if there would be some sort of incentives in wind and other alternatives of energy, then people are going to be just trying to be switching to the other alternative, whether it is uh, feasible or not.
You talk about tax incentives.
Right.
Well, I'm getting like really tired. So I'm really gonna have to cut it off in a few minutes. But
Definitely.
well, the market. That's the whole idea of a market system. Is technology incentivizes people to come up with new ideas and new inventions. When government subsidizes whatever it is they prefer, then usually that's just money wasted. Stalindra type things, right? Um, the fact that government is pushing on the scale, like government is standing on the electric vehicle scale in favor of any other potentially better options, right? The battery powered car is not the best option, because you look at California, they're going to force you to buy a battery car and they're not going to produce the energy necessary to drive the car, right? There's just no electricity being made in California, if virtually none. They have blackouts, brownouts, and they're only going to get worse because 1/3 of their energy comes from other states. And right now they're going to get rid of all of their fossil fuels within the next, I think, decade and a half. And that's when the ICE is banned sales of gasoline cars. And of course, if you have a gasoline car in California, it's worthless now. You can't resell it, right? You're eventually not going to be able to resell it in state. Gas stations are going to start to close. So where are you going to fill up, right? You want to go on a trip, can't go to California. If you have a gas car, what's going to happen to gas stations in California? They're all going to close, right? You're destroying the business of a lot of small businesses. You're destroying them, right? That's most gas stations are owned by entrepreneurs.
Right.
It's a whole nother, but it's a part of the whole manipulative system, right? So basically, what they're doing is they're choosing through tax incentives and taking IRS money and giving it to certain groups. They're really picking one big winner. They're picking Tesla, right? And Tesla is not really. I don't even consider Tesla a car company necessarily. Tesla it's a signal, right? It's like a virtue signal. on the one hand, and it's a luxury item. It's like people don't buy Teslas because it's a battery powered car. They buy it because it's a Tesla, and they can drive around and tell people how much better they are than others. But
sometimes,
it's hopefully a fancy car, right? And yeah, we actually test drove one on Saturday, and they're quick. I don't like the driving the car necessarily, but I mean they're fun because they're
non-driving technology work, or feels like.
Yeah, well, what I don't like is you take your foot off the brake in a regular car and it'll start to move, right? A Tesla won't. You take your foot off the gas and a regular car will coast. A Tesla just like basically slams on the brakes, right? You're like, think of like a go-kart or something like that, a battery powered. I'd say a golf cart, right? If you ever driven a golf cart, once you only put your foot on the gas for the most part. Put your foot on the gas, it starts up and it starts going. Take your foot off, that's enough and then you could use the brake, but if you take your foot off the gas, it basically stops for the most part. That's what a Tesla's like. I didn't like that because you can't coast into a stoplight. So in a regular car, you take your foot off the gas and you start coasting, right? If you want to,
right,
and to turn green, and then you punch it. You can't do that in a Tesla because it brakes. It's adaptive braking. What do you call it? I forget they call it. It's supposed to save your brakes because you don't use them very much because the electric motor is actually doing the deceleration for you.
Okay. Well, I think we covered a lot. I don't know. Do you want to say some closing remarks or something like that?
Are you going to go to Florida anytime soon? Tell me how it is. Tom Woods, he's in Florida. He'd move to South Dakota if he wasn't connected to Florida. South Dakota's free and open, right?
Okay.
Florida's free and open.
Probably, well, I don't know how everything's going on in Florida concerning because they said that there's going to be another wave of the COVID or something. I don't know, but if nothing happens, then
so-called, they're not cases, they're just positive tests. I would look at, so AIER.org has, they look at Taiwan. Taiwan is like testing nobody. I mean, they never shut down, really, right? They had lockdown, but relative to the world, it's pretty minimal.
Is it because they're working on tracing or something like that?
Well, South Korea, I think, is, but I don't know if Taiwan is, but they really haven't been testing very much, right? Testing is just dumb. It's just stupid, right? There's no point. They test people. You're like, hey, I'm feeling, I got to pass 10 minutes. What the hell? Let's go get a test, right? Because it's free. Government's giving you these free tests. So it's like, what the heck? I got 10 minutes to blow. Let's go get a test. And so it's like, and then it comes back positive, and it's the PCRs. Fauci said 35 and above PCRs are insane. They're using 40 PCRs, right? And this is back in April when he was somewhat honest, right? Now he's been a liar since then, but really completely reversed everything he said before that. We know lockdowns don't work. We know they're a stupid idea. They kill people. They kill massive amounts of people. 10,000 children in the third world every day are being killed, murdered by these lockdowns. Joe Biden brought in Ezekiel Emanuel, who says we should lock down 18 months. He's going to have a mask mandate. You look at rationalground.com, you can look at the data, and if it didn't say mask mandate right here, you would have no idea. Because almost universally, cases spike, come back down, and then mask mandate, and then cases go up. Mask mandate, cases, mask mandate, cases. Right? That's like everywhere around the world, states, everything. That's how it is always. And it's because people don't live in a lab, right? They do these. How much of your mucus is caught by the mask in this lab experiment, right? It's like nobody lives in a lab. They touch their mask, they take it off to breathe, all sorts of stuff, and then they touch things and.
There's everything could possibly have some very low.
California, speaking of lunatics in California, it's no Thanksgiving. If you're going to have it, it's got to be outside. less than 2 hours. You got to wear your mask the whole time. You got to wear masks between bites, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's really ridiculous. So,
Well, at least if doing that would pay off by reducing the cases or the.
but it doesn't, right? I mean, cases go up universally when mask mandates come in, and then to show it, they have this mask mandate, and they say, oh, let's really get a harder mask mandate. It doesn't work. Okay, we need to really ramp up, crush the people that aren't wearing masks. So it's
I think it's like a trade-off because
well, there was an outbreak
but the
at Harborview in the surgery center, which is the most masked part of the hospital, in the most masked hospital in the region, in the most masked region in the country, right? And they had an outbreak.
well,
These are people that are wearing their masks 100% of the time, and they didn't stop an outbreak. So masks just don't work, right? They're designed for very specific. And if you read the box, it says it's not gonna do anything.
right. No, what I was going to say is that if there would be somewhere of some sort of like a trade-off in which you have to have the population such as in Taiwan or in South Korea or the countries where don't have any cases now, where like or Wuhan in China itself, where everybody kind of traded the
Wuhan, they're not reporting, right? So
well, right. You have that too. That there may be some positives that have not been detected or whatever there, but at the same time, you have some sort of the idea that everybody is focused on this thing, right? And if everybody focuses on that, and there are tracings, and there are just more kind of awareness to it.
All right, I'm going to stop the recording for this though. Since we're kind of off taxes, but let me.
56 minutes. Wow.
I think you're still in the room, but